You ready?
Yeah, what, are you looking for fish?
I'm looking for a rock to skip.
Oh.
That was a nice high skip, but it was only one.
Just a boy and his rocks.
Just a boy and his rocks. It's pretty nice here, right?
That's all you need. Are we supposed to be working?
I don't know if I feel like working today. It's so beautiful here.
We're supposed to be filming an episode about what again?
Today's episode is about boondocking.
Hey everybody, I'm Jeremy. I'm the host of the RV Atlas podcast and the author of Where Should We Camp Next? This summer, Sean the camera guy and I are hitching up and heading out on a huge adventure, and we are going to take you along for the ride. From boondocking to beach camping, we are going on 8 great camping trips and sharing our best tips and tricks along the way. This is Let's Go Camping with Go RVing.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the very first episode of Let's Go Camping with Go RVing. Today, Sean the camera guy and I are on an awesome boondocking trip, and we're going to share 8 great tips for you to take your own boondocking trip. But first, let's define boondocking. So boondocking is when you go camping, but not at a campground. So when you're out west, you might go boondocking on BLM land or in a national forest, but we're here in the east, and most boondocking typically takes place on private property. So right now, we are boondocking on our friend Dan and Jess's farm. We're not too far from civilization here, but we are camping in a non-traditional setting. It is not an actual campsite. We're just out on their property enjoying this beautiful farm and this beautiful weather. So let's get right to it and let's dive in and give you 8 great tips so you can go on your own really fun, fantastic boondocking trips. Okay, so tip number 1 for having a successful boondocking trip. You need to understand your RV's capabilities for self-contained camping, because when you go boondocking, you don't have any hookups. At a private campground or a KOA or a Jellystone, you're typically going to have water, electric, and sewer hookups, but you're not going to have those boondocking. So we brought water with us in our freshwater tank. I am currently running my RV off my solar system, and we have a place to dump our tanks on the way out here right at Dan and Jess's farm. So if you go boondocking, you're going to need to bring fresh water with you. You're going to have to understand your batteries and what kind of power they can provide you while you're boondocking. And you're going to need to know where to dump your tanks on the way out, maybe at a gas station or a private business. So tip number 2 for having a great boondocking trip, and this is the most important tip to me personally. Do not go out in the middle of nowhere on your very first boondocking trip. You need to build up your skill set as a boondocker. So on that very first trip out, keep it close to civilization so you know where services are and you know where you can get help if you need it. So tip number 3. You need to gather information up about your boondocking location before you go. So if you are camping on public lands like BLM or Bureau of Land Management land or National Forest Service land, you need to call the local field offices first and get information about where you are allowed to boondock and about local conditions at that time. Now, if you are boondocking on private land like we are at this farm, you want to call your host in advance and ask them if they can take pictures of the spot where you're going to be boondocking and maybe even of the driveway where you're going to enter so that you can make sure that your RV can get into that place. Don't just assume that you can before you go. Tip number 4. Always check the local weather conditions right before you leave for your boondocking trip. I checked the weather the day before we left, and I wanted to know 2 specific things. I wanted to make sure that there was not going to be rain in the forecast, because we are boondocking along a creek here, and when it rains, it can flood, and that would be an absolute no-go for a boondocking trip. I also saw that it was going to be a little bit chilly at night, so I made sure to fill up my propane tanks so that we could run the furnace and keep the RV toasty warm in the evening when it got a little bit chilly. Tip number 5, and this one is especially important if you're boondocking with kids. Since you are not at a traditional campground with a playground and a pool and other amenities, you're going to want to make sure you bring your own entertainment with you. So we met our friends Dan and Jess here last night, and they camped here as well on their Airstream, and they brought their ladder ball game along, and the adults played and the kids played, and we had a blast. Tip number 6. Do not assume you are allowed to have a campfire when you are boondocking. If you are boondocking on BLM land, you need to check with their field office and make sure that you are allowed to have campfires at that time. The same thing for boondocking on National Forest Service land. Call the field office and make sure you are allowed to have a campfire. It varies very much region by region. Here on Dan and Jess's farm, I asked them in advance if I could bring my campfire with me, my small portable campfire. They said no problem, and so we had a nice campfire last night, and it was quite fun and relaxing. Tip number 7, and let me just be Captain Obvious here for a minute. When you are boondocking, there is no camp store. You cannot buy, let's say, camp store ice cream while you are boondocking. So if you want that special ice cream treat at night after you've had the campfire, make sure you bring it with you. Okay, so our last tip, tip number 8. Make sure you take time to kick back and relax and spend some time in nature. Maybe turn your cell phone off for a while. Maybe you don't have reception anyway. I think that for most of us, boondocking is about getting away from it all and just having some time to relax and enjoy this great, big, beautiful world that we live in. Thank you so much for joining us for the very first episode of Let's Go Camping with Go RVing. I hope you enjoyed these 8 tips for boondocking. If you want more information about boondocking or about RVing in general, or you want to find a dealer near you, head on over to GoRVing.com.